Perhaps you've seen it. Maybe in a dream. A murky, forgotten land.
Hello there, Servum17 once again. I know you probably weren't expecting to hear that intro, and I was hoping you wouldn't have to listen to that intro, but mistakes were made, folks, when I was recording this. I'm not entirely sure why, but the commentary for this video has been lost. And my only real summation as to how this happened was because I was using Audacity, and because you have to do a lot of manual things to export your files and what have you, and get rid of the previous one, start recording, all that kind of great stuff. Because I was recording a lot of episodes back to back in a rapid sequence, and I was sleep deprived and various other things, I must have just forgot to export one, clicked it off and continued recording. And I believe so far it's happened twice. So there might be two videos where you're going to hear me in post commentary, which I didn't want to be the case. It's just all I can really do. This is a 26-minute long video, and you know, just letting you listen to the game is not going to be as fulfilling as me sharing some of my thoughts, because a lot of people are here for my thoughts, hence, you know, why they're watching the playthrough. There are those that will come just to watch the game, but it's, you know, it's generally a toss-up between. Another issue that I would have had if I were to just increase the volume is, as a lot of you have noticed, and a lot of the people who've been here a while already know this, but my capture device, because it's quite old now, for no other reason than it's turning into a piece of shit, it gradually desyncs itself as you record, and there is no way to remedy it. It's just something that is wrong with the product, and I'm going to have to get a new one. And because they're quite expensive, I've put it off for a little while, but hopefully I'll get one quite soon, and I'll never have this issue ever again. But the people who are wondering what issue it is, at the beginning of every video I go left, right, B. And obviously I've got the menu up in the top left, and when I press B the menu decreases. And I line up the game audio and the commentary by doing this, and it is a fantastic way, it's very easy, it's very quick of lining it up. And what would happen if I didn't have a shitty PVR is it would flawlessly have everything in sync for the entire episode. And you might be wondering, well, how come it's not in sync? Well, that's the issue. My system, for some reason, gradually destabilizes, and the audio bleeds out of sync with what is happening in the game, and thus my commentary bleeds out of sync with the game audio. And it makes it really confusing to edit, because if it was just the game audio that was, you know, going out of sync, and it went out of sync at a very specific moment, it would be fine. But it's the fact that sometimes it goes out ever so slightly, and once it begins, the delay gets longer and longer and longer until it becomes ridiculous, and then there are times when it will come back into sync. So instead of it just being, you know, one simple cut along the audio line, some realignments, and boom, it turns into several cuts, and it turns an editing job from about 5 minutes to about 15 to 50, depending on, you know, how deep you want to go. And I always do try to my best to get it as coherent as possible, but there are a lot of instances where I've cut it several times and there's still delays in certain parts, and I've tried to make sure that the important areas have a decent sync up, because there's nothing worse, there's nothing more discordant in your brain than watching something and hearing something different. It's profoundly affecting, and you don't even realise it until you spot it. And it's something from a content producer's standpoint that is incredibly frustrating, because as I've mentioned, the only way I can fix it is by meticulously destroying and chopping up the audio timeline and then making it fit, and you will always lose quality by doing so. It's just how it works. You will trim away something you didn't even realise that was important. Like, one of the cool things about the live stuff is you can hear my hands on the pad, because I'm quite heavy on my pads, and you know, I think there's something authentic about being able to hear me when I'm trying to get lock on, and you can hear it clicking and nothing's happening, and you know, when I'm trying to roll, or just interesting things like that. When I do the guard break and you hear exactly what a guard break should sound like, and the character does a slash and I die. You know, things like that are little subtle parts of the playthrough that give it depth and make it interesting. And as you can tell, I've spent over 16,000 souls with Maulin, and he's enabled me to purchase the Alva set, which I think is one of the nicest looking armors on the game. I'll be using it for a little while, but because the armors are new, you're going to see me change my outfit quite a lot, and I end up upgrading the Mastodon set quite high, and I go to it as my go-to defensive gear, even though, which I'm sure most of you know / will discover when you play, defense on this game is a lot like Demon Souls, I think. And what I mean by that is, regardless of how high you're defensive, it doesn't really seem to make that much difference. The enemies still hit like trucks, and they do a lot of damage. And where it's not quite as useless as it was back in the good old days, it's still noticeable that when you have 700 defense in slash, strike, and all that good stuff, and enemies are still two-shotting you, skinny ones in fact, it's a little weird. And it plays into an interview that I remember listening to during the making of series that IGN was pushing out before the game dropped. And one of the developers, he said something that, you know, really resonated with me, because I agreed with it completely. And he said they never want an enemy to be stronger than it looks. They always want things to look appropriate. And, you know, if you've played Dark Souls, you'll know that they're not even following their own mantra, because that's just not true. You know, there's enemies in this game that are huge. Take the mummies in this zone, for instance, with the scythes who are kind of blind and they stumble around. Aside from a couple of big hits, they are one of the easiest enemies on the game because they're so lumbering and their life isn't that high. They're kind of stupid. They're just very simple to fight. The artificial undeads in the Huntsman Cops, the dudes with the two giant, you know, Chotel things. That thing doesn't have enough life to really be that threatening. As long as you dodge its attack, or you backstab it, or you stunlock it, or you just get it killed in 1 to 2 hits, it goes down very quickly, and it looks so much more threatening and imposing than it is. And then conversely to this, look at the dragon guys in the dragon area. They're wearing light armor, they're just, you know, NPC dudes with war picks and stuff. They will destroy you. They will absolutely destroy you, and they look like just standard dudes wearing gold armor, and they'll wreck you. They really will. They'll just melt you. Look at the bottom of the gutter. When you get down that bottom ladder and there's all those skinny bastards, and you're like, oh, it's just another skinny undead, and he's got a dark broken sword that one-shots you. He looks like a leper that Jesus would have healed, and yet he can one-shot you. Yet those giant dudes here will never one-shot you, ever. Not even in the company of champions. I don't think they'll ever be able to one-shot you. It's just, it doesn't make a lot of sense that they can say that that was one of the philosophies and then not adhere to it. So I find that kind of bizarre. But I suppose it's just, you know, a victim of circumstance, because they're trying to put in enemies that they believe are going to be interesting and different and alternate them enough that you don't get bored. And I don't really mind those swarming skinny bastards with the dark swords so much, because now I know that they're there, they'll never do what they do to me in this playthrough, which you have to look forward to. And it's one of those learning experiences. But like the mastodons, huge, lumbering, massive armor, big, you know, halberd, big shield, and they're just cream puffs. They're really fun to fight because they're pretty shitty, and they look like they'd be really crazily tough. And it's interesting like that, this game. But this particular instance here, we're talking to Straid, and I believe I'm purchasing some of his unique gear, purchasing some of his spells, checking out what he sells, all that kind of stuff, reading descriptions. And I do a lot of that in this playthrough because it is my first time through the game. And I think a blind playthrough, or a playthrough in general for me, means something different than it means to a lot of people. Because I've been watching a ton of Dark Souls 2, because what I like to do with any game that's quite new is once I've done my videos, I like to watch other people's videos. A lot of it is educational, so I can, you know, get some kind of frame of references where I stack up in quality, in presentation, in what they're doing, what they're saying, all that kind of good stuff. And on the other hand, you know, you will learn things from other people because they'll find things you didn't see, they'll know things you don't know, they'll stumble on stuff. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people are saying things that are wrong, you know, that have been disproven or that contradict certain things you might know, but at the same time it's still this body of knowledge, this amalgamation of ideas coming together, and it's the strongest aspect of the community. Because unfortunately Dark Souls has a bit of a plague of a community that follows it, and it generally goes into a more elitist and more intolerant perspective, which I have been accused of at times, and I have been guilty of at times, which I'm trying to stamp out, because I don't really know where it comes from. I'm not too sure about it. I think it's very ugly. Speaking of ugly, just this, like, you can tell I don't want to go down, and if you could hear the commentary, I'm pretty much summing up everything. There is so many dogs down here, and the dogs on this game admittedly are not as strong as they were in the older titles, but this many dogs together will bleed you and stun lock you and kill you and all sorts of really bad stuff. And they've put them in a very intentional position where you can't really do anything against them. And as you can see, Flameswith does not do so good on the vertical axis. But it's just the ultimate troll area. It's a courtyard of just nasties. And to make matters worse, there's an NPC that spawns who is essentially a turtle with a shield and a spear. So it's kind of this just accumulation of things that aren't very fun to fight. And especially considering now that the NPCs on this game are so strong, so goddamn evil to fight, because parrying has changed and it's much more difficult this time around to figure out the timings just because of the delay. It just makes fighting NPCs incredibly challenging. NPCs that do things, and here I quote guys, do things you physically cannot do. And it's something I immensely disagree with, but at the same time it makes it very challenging, so there is something to come from it which is interesting, but it's interesting in a way that's not very fair. And I read a comment earlier today from a guy saying that he did some tests, and I assume he's analysing frame data and slowing things down and what have you, to see the recovery between your attacks and the NPC/AI attacks. And he's worked it out. He didn't give me any science or any links to any videos or anything, but he worked it out that the AI recovers exponentially faster than you do from attacks. They have less recovery frames, less time to recover, and thus, you know, are very dangerous because of this. And when you combine that with the fact that the AI swings faster than you ever will, with almost every single weapon, it puts you at a massive disadvantage. I don't really mind those two things, even though I do think they're there to trap new players and to catch out people who aren't paying attention. Because there are enemies in this game, the mannequins, the rogues. I can't quite think of any others off the top of my head at this moment in time, but those two in particular, these are enemies that can combo you and take your entire life bar without you being able to do anything about it. Because poise on the game works in such a very strange and fragmented way. If they get the first hit, and it happens to be one of the hits where they do the multiple flurry, you are dead for a lot of instances, unless you have put points into vigor or you're wearing really good armor. You're dead, you know. I rock really high adaptability, and there are times when I cannot roll out of their attacks, and they do 4 to 5 hits, and you're dead. And I really don't think it's very fair at all, because you can't do that to them a lot of the times, because they will just hyper armor through your attacks, and you don't have any attacks on this game except for maybe the Twin Blade or the Running Halberd that even hits remotely as many times as quickly as these enemies do. And like, you might not even see a problem with it when you've played these areas, because I didn't. You know, like on my playthrough, the mannequins really weren't too big of a deal because I stayed on top of them and I never got into a spot where I enabled them to do the things that they're good at. But on repeat plays, and the game has been out now just under 3 weeks, and this playthrough that you are watching is probably from the 2nd to 3rd day of the game being out. In fact, it's from before the game came out because I got the game early. So this literally might be release day footage or day after release day that you're watching. And obviously, it's been a while. I mean, this won't hit the channel for another couple of weeks, so this will be even older at that point because of how big this playthrough is and because of how long it takes me to upload it. And I'm going to really try, guys, to get it more constant so you can see it quicker, because I know a lot of people really want to watch it, and there is, you know, some frustration and annoyance with that. I actually had somebody unsubscribe because I was, quote, posting a blind playthrough for a game that's over several weeks old. So, yeah, the kind of logic we're dealing here on YouTube, guys. A game that's literally brand new, has been out less than 3 weeks, has been out several weeks, and thus no one should post it. Yes, well, quite the endearing genius, that one. But I think there's something nice and something charming to the fact that it hasn't just, you know, boo-cackage your inbox, that it is this incremental thing. And a lot of people have already got their playthroughs, their guides, all that kind of stuff already pushed out, and I think mine is going to be definitely unique. And this goes back to a point that I was making earlier when I said that my idea of a playthrough is different to other people's. I've been watching a lot of playthroughs of this game, guys, and they're all edited. Every single one of them is edited, and in some circumstance I can understand why, because it alleviates a lot of the frustration of the viewer, but to me, the whole point of a playthrough and a blind playthrough is that you see the struggle, you see it all. You see the good, you see the bad, you see the tedious, you see the excitement. You know, that is what it is. If I were to edit this, how would it be any different to my guides? My guides are essentially a perfect run of games. I go through, I crush, I succeed, there are no deaths, it is all flows, it's fluid, it's done, it's quick, it's efficient, it's boom. Why would you want to play through like that? I wouldn't. From myself, from other people, I don't mind at all, you know, I just watch vicariously. I really don't judge people who do playthroughs. The only people who even provoke my ire remotely are the folks who do playthroughs and call them walkthroughs and then have the nerve to slag off other people who do the exact same thing as them, just slightly less competently. And if anybody knows who I'm talking about, then you understand exactly what I'm saying. But to me, a playthrough is, it's everything. It's the dirt and grime, it's, you know, it's the tears, it's the blood, it's the sweat, and that's what you're going to be seeing, folks. You're going to even hear me say, I think I should edit this part just so that you don't have to watch this run back. But those run backs, to me almost, are as important as the boss fights, because they show you what my mindset was like. They show you how I felt. You get to share the frustration and just... I think the point of this, for me more than anybody else, and a lot of people will probably disagree, was just the roller coaster of that first playthrough. And I think that's what makes it so unique. That's not even mentioning the fact that I'm not putting any points into my high health, so I die very fast. That's not mentioning that I'm in the company of champions, a covenant that nobody joined at the beginning of the game except for, you know, truly challenge-seeking gamers. And those two things themselves make this already incredibly unique for that fact. Or I like to think so anyway, you know. Like, when Epic Namebro, pretty much the spokesman of the Dark Souls community, because he's incredibly popular and he's a really nice guy who himself really likes challenge as well, when he says you don't want to pick this on your first playthrough, it tells you that it really is for the people wanting to be destroyed, and that is exactly what happens, and I get destroyed and you get to watch. And in a year's time, when you look back on these videos, if anybody does come back, you know, you get to see that. You don't just see what you're probably going to be seeing in the next few months. I mean, boom! Check that stuff out. I go for a parry, my timing is bad, and I get murdered by two-handed spear pokes. But you won't see this in the coming stuff that I'm going to be presenting on this game. You're going to see the successes, you're going to see the improvements. Like, this is before I'd even seen the credits. Now I've seen the credits about 10 to 15 times, and that's not counting just using human bonfire ascetics on Nishandra. I've done a playthrough now of every kind of base build. Int, Faith, Hex, dual wield, Strength, you know, this. I've done a lot of stuff. I've made a mundane build, I've made a miracle build, I've done a lot of stuff. And like I've got this game down now where I'm not necessarily trying to speedrun it, but I can beat it in under 4 hours, which is not me bragging by any measure. It's not me saying, you know, I'm something amazing, as you can see. Just got completely destroyed again. All that is once you know what you're doing, you can get through the game very swiftly. And that probably brings me to a topic that a lot of people are asking about that I should probably address. And that's the Mega Mule. Dom's Mega Mule. Dom is Dom Thy Bomb, a streamer and a very notorious member of the Dark Souls community. You either love the guy or you hate him, and it's absolutely nothing to do with him as a person. It's to do with his standings on cheating, I guess you could say. And what I mean by this is Dom has created a save file on Dark Souls 1. I don't know if he did it on Demon Souls, and he made it on Dark Souls 2. It is a save file with 0 soul memory, so it's as if you've never played the game, and you start with every single piece of equipment, every single weapon, every single type of infusement on every weapon, and 60,000 of every consumable. It is a build that enables people who want to PvP with very little PvE. You can literally turn your game on, you can equip super overpowered stuff, you can run straight through things betwixt, you can immediately go, I don't know, through the Forest of Fallen Giants, through the Cardinal Tower, get to Hyde, get into the Bell Tower, wear that ring, and boom. You might even start with that ring in that Covenant. I'm not entirely sure, guys. But you'll start with enough cracked orbs and blue orbs that you can invade from the very beginning. And because this game seems to read soul memory more than it reads soul level, what that means is you're going to be able to go up against people very early on in the game. And in Dark Souls, the threat of this generally came from people who knew how to get elemental weapons. Those people were called Twinkers. They invaded folks early level with, you know, Ascended Pyromancy Flames and one-shot them with Combustions, one-shot them with, you know, like Lightning, Zweihanders, whatever they wanted to carry. I got a lot of shit on my low-level Invasion series because everybody was calling me a twink, but I think if everybody's honest to themselves when they look into what twink actually means, I was so far from a twink it's not even funny compared to what some folk did at the beginning of Dark Souls. And what FromSoft has done is they've consciously seen these examples of bullshit, even though they're the same people who put in the Stormtroller, which a weapon that knocks you over and you can't do anything in that animation until you stand back up, are wanting to somehow alleviate the trolling, which is just deliciously ironic. But back on tangent, to alleviate this problem, they've made it so that essentially you can't do that anymore because your soul memory will put you up against people who have collected as many souls as you have, and hopefully those people aren't, you know, soul level 1 running around with broken straight swords, and that is the logic behind it. So the mule completely supersedes this, and it enables people to have things that they feasibly could not have against people who can't, and that is one of the major criticisms of it. I don't really mind that too much because I do believe that getting invaded by somebody with super strong stuff and getting shit on is one of the best ways to learn that perhaps this game was never intended to be fair, and the people who parade as these white knights looking for perfect balance and fairness are just never going to get it as far as PvP is concerned. And PvE is a completely different story because I think PvE can be balanced and it can be perfected. PvE just never will because you can never underestimate the savviness and just the deliciousness of evil people who want to make really sick and strong builds. But the thing with the mule is this game has been out, as I've mentioned, under 3 weeks. And to me, releasing a mule this early on is disgusting. You know, I just don't condone it at all. I don't mind if you use it. I have nothing against Dom. I've watched his streams. He seems like a nice guy. But I just think that it doesn't benefit anybody, in my way of thinking. And you might be wondering, well, how does that work? You used a saved editor on Dark Souls. You were quite open, you know, quite outspoken about the usefulness of making really fast PvP builds. How can you say that you don't like a mule this early on when the PvP is ripe, there's tons of players, and you can, you know, make the most out of the situation before everybody goes back to Dark Souls, like some of the, you know, apocalyptic streamers are saying, the end is nigh, nobody's going to be playing in a year, you know. Well, the reason I can say that, folks, is because I spent over 1.5 years playing Dark Souls the way everybody else does. I learnt Dark Souls, I figured it out, I conquered it. I did everything I could do that I wanted to do. I farmed for longer than most people played. I did the whole shebang. So at that point, I had already earned the right to do whatever hell I wanted in Dark Souls because I'd already done it and earned it the right way. That's how I feel. A lot of people disagree with that sentiment, and I'll never understand that opinion because it's complete converse to mine, and a lot of people try to change my mind on that, and they just can't because it's just the way that I view it. And this is not in regards to PvE, guys. This is in regards to PvP. Because playing against a computer, do what you want, you know. Just don't annoy me. That's generally how I'm like. There's always going to be people that want to cheese a game they can't beat because there's a lot of people out there that really shouldn't be playing games. They should be knitting or making tampons. But as I get my souls back, nothing wrong with knitting, by the way. Knitting is pretty damn baller, especially if you're fast and good at it. And I don't really know how tampons are made if people indeed do anything with them. I was just trying to be very derogatory and offensive, and hopefully it worked on some oversensitive dude who probably writing a very mad comment right now. But on a serious note, what the mule allows people to do is it allows them to alleviate playing the game. And my argument against that fact is, why did you buy it? And I know there's a lot of people who just play for PvP. A lot of people just play for PvP. And that is fine. But you have to have a base understanding of the game to benefit your PvP. And that playthrough, or those few playthroughs you do before you start doing nothing but PvP, are so key and important to how you'll play and how you'll understand the game. And you might not know it at the time, but those trials and those deaths and those bullshit moments and those victories have all made you a better player, and they've made you understand the subsystems of the game so much more than you would if you'd have just started PvPing. And people are going to just completely skip that. You know, they're going to get rid of those awesome moments, those awesome experiences, because this thing is available. Like, I fought a guy in the arena. I recognise his name because it was so hilarious, and I've remembered it. He was called Fisto the Defiler. Fisto the Defiler. I had a good chuckle at his name, and he was a decent player. We had a good fight. And afterwards, he sent me a message about the lag. And I was like, yeah, you know, it's not fun. There's not really much you can do. It kind of kills the competitive urge. And he sent me a message back saying, you know, the game's too new to really be competitive. There's too much bullshit, so he's not really bothered about that. He's just playing for fun. And I get that completely. I'm the same, you know. I can't be competitive on my connection. And to me, being competitive is wanting to win. It's not going and doing fight clubs and, you know, joining stream fight clubs and standing in those spots and waiting for red signs. That's not my idea of competitive. That's just fight clubs. My idea of competitive is wanting to win against a human being. You know, it draws back to the age-old time. And what really resonated from that discussion with that person who we had a fight, who I fought in the arena a couple times, was just the notion that nobody knows what they're doing at this point. Everybody's playing for fun, and a lot of the builds that we have are not optimized. They're not even worth the time we're putting into them. You know, there's stats all over the place and things that just don't make sense. And there's a charm to that. There's this novelty to everybody kind of flailing at the same time and enjoying the flail. Because in a month or two's time, when everything's figured out, that won't exist. Everybody will be so mid-maxed and, you know, so just bullshitty and on the ball that you're not going to have that unless you invade. So why would anybody want to just speed up the process from the game, going from this innocent, naive, you know, mess of a PvP to this highly orchestrated, you know, honor-bound, bullshitty, you know, super meta, obsessing over stats, and I don't understand why anybody wants that immediately. To me, you're just killing you're killing the birthday party, and I just disagree. What do you think about the Mega Mule, guys? What's your thoughts on it? Hopefully this will be the last time I speak over a video like this, but I think there's another one coming, so I do apologise, guys. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you're enjoying the series, and you take care now.